Hi, my name is Nicholas Marais Reyneke and I'm a postgraduate student at the University of Exeter. My supervisors are Katrina Brown and Thomas Shanua. My research title is Exploring Socially Marginalised Youth Voices within Social-Ecological Systems to Mitigate Environmental Risk and Understand Community Resilience. During this presentation, I will be explaining why I'm doing the research, what I'll be doing in the research, and how I plan to do the research. The lives of all people are at risk because of the current climate crisis, with the effects of global environmental change and the increasing movement of people into large urban areas. Environmental risks are occurring more often and with more intensity. These environmental risks are defined as risks with the potential to disrupt the stability of our planet's systems and put them under unprecedented stress. Environmental risks, including environmental disasters and global environmental change, are potentially affecting areas of vulnerable people's lives the most in fragile, affected circumstances. No person or group of people is more vulnerable than another from these environmental risks. It is the context in which they live that makes them more vulnerable. A person is likely to experience several stresses at once when these contexts intersect. These multi-layered stresses include environmental risks, as well as historical oppression, economic impoverishment, and social marginalization, all that increase the vulnerability of people. Sonia Andermar defines social marginalization as the process by which individuals or groups live at the periphery of society because of their exclusion from the economic, social, political, and cultural areas of everyday life. This can have a significant impact on how resources are accessed and mobilized, and how urgent decisions are negotiated and made. This process can lead to low self-esteem, feelings of hopelessness and depression, increased risk-taking behaviors, as well as other adverse socio-economic outcomes, such as unemployment. By understanding these vulnerabilities, marginalized people have the potential to strengthen their community resilience in fragile, affected human communities. There is a tendency to omit youth, including marginalized youth, from important decision-making processes, with assumptions that youth have neither the experience, background, nor the maturity to assert rights. Others have made similar investigations, claiming also that one of the main reasons the youth have been marginalized in society for so long is because of the absence of their true voices in public discourse. In her work on the youth's roles and representation in social research in the mid-90s, Priscilla Alderson claimed that the views of voiceless young people had been generally overlooked in research. She described the adult-centered nature of research until that time, which was conducted about the public world, including the environment and other social affairs, with little reference to the youth. To address this problem, the youth from this research will be at the center of the research, with the aim of taking on a youth-centered approach. The marginalized youth from this research have all experienced multi-layered stresses. These young people have been sidelined in society because there's a lack of knowledge about them, their needs, and their life. This means there's a lack of policy addressing their needs. However, for the same reasons, they may not have had a platform or the means to be heard, to be called for change in the past. So due to a lack of access to participation in fundamental decision-making processes, being ignored and socially excluded has relegated these young people to the fringes of society. Katrin Schiffer and Ebert Schatz point out this could lead to a major cause of discrimination and vulnerability. The environmental focus of this research, Raphael Biget, argues some economically impoverished people depend on biodiversity for their human well-being and are therefore potentially more vulnerable when this biodiversity is lost. impoverished people are potentially highly vulnerable to stresses associated with environmental risk. These stresses can be amplified by ecological degradation, while better environmental decision-making processes could reduce the impact of environmental risk. Risk in relation to place have important implications for the resilience of societies. Dillis-Rowe argues where ecosystems are declining, impoverished populations often become more vulnerable. It seems negligent to continue environmental conversations about youth at risk without direct engagement with marginalised youth about environmental risks and its implications for them. This research will attempt to answer how marginalised people are living in fragile affected circumstances while experiencing the stresses of environmental risk. Given that almost all major phenomena of great social consequence, such as global environmental change, has generally affected some groups more than others, this research asks, what are the implications for environmental risks for the marginalised youth living in places of fragile affected circumstances? A research approach of civic engagement is a principle that, when put into practice, could be an empowering way to nurture and understand community resilience. Shepard-Zeldin highlights where marginalised young people are meaningfully engaged in their community, they could become agents of change. However, despite this, not all collaborative research demonstrates clearly how this is achieved. Rachel Payne argues the failure among researchers, stakeholders, and policymakers to open research and decision-making in meaningful ways points to ownership and power. In other words, who should participate, with whom, and most importantly, for whose benefit. While these questions are well rehearsed in human geography research, much collaborative research fails to reach the standard it presents in practice. So, it seems clear from previous research the role of marginalised youth in environmental decision-making has been sidelined in knowledge production processes, suggesting more collaboration and participation with other privileged groups of people. Therefore, to address this, momentum needs to be gathered to include the direct marginalised youth participation in wider environmental decision-making processes. At its core, this research uses comparative case study to involve the analysis and synthesis of the differences, similarities, and patterns across two cases in two large-scale ecoregions. The two cases in Colombia and South Africa share commonality in a way that will potentially produce collaborative knowledge that will be easier to generalize some of the research aims. The first case study, the tropical Andes, includes large areas of South America. The focus of this case study will be on the Colombian portions of the tropical Andes. The Colombian Andes Mountains are vital sources of water for Colombian people. This is significant as major rivers provide water to large Colombian cities and rural areas. Colombia also benefits from an important buffering capacity of tropical wetlands. These neotropical alpine ecosystems act as water catchments, known as páramos. These páramos cover the Colombian tropical Andes with a total area of 21,000 square kilometers. Páramos are considered a major water source for Andean highlands. Today, these water catchments are under threat from the environmental risk of deforestation due to changing land use practice. This is a major concern as páramos provide water to large areas of the drier lowlands. The 34 páramos ecosystems covering the Colombian tropical Andes are characterized by a high and sustained base flow because of the high water retention capacity of the soils. This high water retention function of the páramos ecosystems are crucial to water security needs to Colombian people. Significantly, páramos are increasingly threatened by global environmental change, since higher temperatures displace ecosystems upslope, leading to biodiversity loss. These higher temperatures lead to increased evapotranspiration, resulting in lower water production from páramos. The future environmental risks of seasonality and precipitation also affect the páramos ecosystem through reducing the soil water retention, altering soil cycles, and increasing soil dryness. All of this potentially leading to increased flow variability in the water catchment. The second case study, the Baviaanskloof, is recognized by UNESCO for its outstanding universal value as part of South Africa's Cape Floral Kingdom. Because of significant biodiversity, which has global importance, the Baviaanskloof was listed by the IUCN as a World Heritage Site in 2004. It is important to understand the context of the environmental risks currently impacting human communities in the Baviaanskloof. Previous research exists on the threat of land degradation in this region and the interlinkages to environmental risk. The Baviaanskloof subtropical thicket biome is a major center of endemism and biodiversity, covering an area of 42,000 hectares. This globally significant subtropical thicket biome has been severely impacted through human activity, such as overgrazing, and accelerated by global environmental change. According to Anthony Mills, thicket does not regenerate easily once degraded. Notably, desertification in the Baviaanskloof increases erosion and surface runoff, causing the environmental risks of devastating flooding and severe drought. Significantly, these environmental risks also have implications for the human well-being of the people living in the Baviaanskloof, who rely on the water resources from the water catchment in a predominantly agricultural community. Despite these challenges in the Baviaanskloof, opportunities lie in restoring the surrounding water catchment area. The Baviaanskloof area covers 6,000 square kilometers, consisting of a cluster of state-owned protected areas within a network of private and communal lands. Together with the Koga and Krom water catchments, with an area of about 10,000 square kilometers, these water catchments supply 70% of the water to the 1 million people living in the city of Port Elizabeth, located in South Africa's most impoverished province. The young women and men of the Baviaanskloof community are from various cultures, mainly Afrikaans, Cape Coloured and Khoisan descendants. This research will concentrate on the socially marginalised young Cape Coloured youth of the Baviaanskloof. The Cape Coloured, or in Afrikaans known as the Kleurlinge, are a multiracial minority ethnic group from Southern Africa. Notably, none of the young Kleurlinge people from this research are landowners. This is significant as it has implications for their livelihoods and rights to decision-making concerning the environment. A framework proposed by Elinor Ostrom has inspired the researcher's conceptualization of social-ecological systems. These complex systems that are shaped by the interactions between people and ecosystems are the essence of what is called an SES. The use of this thinking in the two research case study sites sees natural and human systems integrated and explores the resilience of these integrated systems. This research has adapted this framework to further examine the central research aim and the requirements of analyzing the implications of environmental risk on the lives of the marginalized youth. This research takes a closer look at exploring marginalized youth voices living in fragile affected circumstances. This conceptual framework presents an approach that seeks to develop and strengthen participatory action research when applied in SESs by combining it with resilience thinking. By drawing on elements from resilience thinking within an SES, this research has the potential to explore the youth's voices to mitigate environmental risk and understand community resilience. By understanding these complexities within an SES, the marginalized youth have the potential to adapt and persist through ongoing changing circumstances. For this research, the relevance of empirics when it comes to understanding community resilience within an SES is important, and therefore a conceptual framework diagram is needed. Drawing on two case studies representing worldviews, the research engages with impoverished communities living in fragile biodiversity hotspots. The concept worldview from this framework is seen as the set of beliefs that influence and ground the marginalized youth's thinking, knowing, and doing in the places where they live. This research will take a weak constructionist approach, whereby environmental risk is viewed as a subjective hazard. In other words, these environmental risks could be mitigated or minimized by enhanced environmental decision-making processes with the participation of the marginalized youth. The Venn diagram on the right illustrates the interacting influences of the marginalized youth with the stakeholders and policymakers. The Venn diagram shows the engagement between these social actors in an SES and its impacts on potential community resilience. The entire SES in the diagram functions within the space of a participatory action research methodology with the marginalised youth. The two interlocking processes in the diagram, mitigating environmental risk and community resilience within an SES, work in tandem, relying on continuous feedback. This constitutes a participatory action research process that is punctuated by enhanced environmental decision-making processes. Desirable resilience of SESs is driven by the implications of mitigating environmental risk and strengthening community resilience. The two thicker arrows in the diagram indicate desirable resilience. Research methods. The research will incorporate qualitative methods from the beginning of the research process, recognizing that there are many preferred ways of communication to connect the views and concerns of the marginalized youth. So exploring these methods, reflections are not in the interest of the researcher only. The input and feelings of the young people during this collaborative process is vital. When working with young people during this research, it will be critical to focus on their voice and listening to young people's accounts of their experiences and social histories in their communities. This research will be arranged in response to young people's requests with open participation. This view connects to the aims of the research, as the youth have not had the opportunity to participate in wider decision-making processes, emphasizing collective inquiry and empowering their voices. Open participation in wider environmental decision-making processes will be at the core of the PAR approach. These processes work closely with the young people to devise collaborative storytelling that targets to bring oral histories to the attention of stakeholders and policymakers. The PAR approach will be used in an accessible way for reflexive and open dialogue to advocate change. This approach gives visibility to challenges that might not have otherwise been revealed by using standard interviews, online polls, or social surveys. This youth-centered research incorporates information and communications technology, recognizing that there are many preferred ways of communication to enhance the views and concerns of the youth. The potential availability of environmental information is one application of information and communications technology. The relatively low cost of sharing environmental information is potentially a major factor enabling stakeholders to participate more directly and rapidly in environmental decision-making processes. To access the information from the environment, this could give marginalized youth the opportunity to represent themselves and tell their own story within the PAR methods. New technologies, such as the Internet of Things and unmanned aircraft system technology, will potentially be used in research to gather and share environmental decision-making, potentially improving decision-making processes. In a PAR context, photos and maps are created for advocacy purposes. Within ethical frameworks from both countries, I will focus on the following principles: consent and safeguarding, clarity of research purpose, confidentiality, anonymity, equality and diversity, putting the marginalized youth at the center of the research. It is critical that the co-researchers understand that the photos and maps they contribute for gathering data are theirs. The co-researchers also have the right to remove any of the photos or maps at any point during the research and into the future. Throughout the research, the youth will need to respect the privacy of those in the community, especially during transect walks and the use of unmanned aircraft systems. To access large areas, it will be critical to receive consent from the key stakeholders and landowners before collecting data. Therefore, ensuring good communication with stakeholders and landowners is essential. Conflict can be avoided by explaining the purpose of the research to all people involved clearly. This will potentially lead to improved dissemination and co-production of knowledge and research findings. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for watching. I've really enjoyed doing this. If you'd like to get in contact with me, my email is here below. If you have any questions or more information regarding the research, please feel free to contact me, and any feedback is always welcome. Thank you. Goodbye.